Command, I think is a good one to start. And we're proud to have a person that is well known to this audience, Lieutenant General retired Kevin Campbell, to moderate for us. So, Kevin, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Guy, very much, and good morning to all of you. Good to see many familiar faces. We get to see Dave Mann, not in Huntsville, but usually every place else, so it's good to see you. So inherent in the air and missile defense portfolio is the development of a common network mission command. It's spelled out in the strategy. It's spelled out in the Joint Integrated Air and Missile Defense Strategy as well. So we've assembled a panel today of experts in their areas that I think well qualified to talk in depth about this particular area of networked mission command. So I'll introduce the panel. Brigadier General Bill Burleson to my right, the CG out at, the Director of the Mission Command Center of Excellence out at Leavenworth, Major General John Morrison, the CG of Network Enterprise Technology Command, Mr. Ron Pontius, the Deputy to the CG out at U.S. Army Cyber Command, Brigadier General Tim Sheriff, the Deputy Commanding General of 263rd Army Air and Missile Defense Command, Colonel Kelly Spillane, the Deputy Commander for Support at Dave Mann's organization, Space and Missile Defense Command, and Mr. Dan Verwiel, the Vice President and General Manager for Missile Defense and Protective Systems, Northrop Grumman Mission Systems, my colleague down in Huntsville. And Dan's portfolio includes all of the air and missile defense work we do within Northrop Grumman, so the MDA C2BMC program, ground-based mid-course defense, the Army's Integrated Air and Missile Defense Battle Command System. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bill.
Well, thank you, sir, and certainly thank you to you as well as General Swan, General Sullivan, General Mann for inviting us. And on behalf of General Brown, certainly we appreciate the opportunity to talk here. But, you know, going to your intro, sir, you said experts. Those would be those to my right. But what I'll talk a little bit about is, I mean, when we start talking about the network enabling mission command, as we talk about mission command, the philosophy is about developing leaders and teams that can understand, visualize, describe, direct in this tremendously complex world that we got. And we got to remember that. It kind of goes back to what, you know, General Sullivan said this morning. We remember that there's a soldier out there. And so the network enables mission command. It enables commanders and staffs to execute their tasks within the mission command warfighting function. And then within the mission command system, we've got the people, the processes, the information systems, and the network. And so between those three things, the philosophy, the warfighting function, and the system, they've all got to work together to allow our teams to sort of win in the complex world that we describe, you know, in the current Army operating concept. So as we kind of look at what are those things we expect and need in a network, you know, about a year and a half ago, our former Chief of Staff of the Army asked us as a sort of collective body to describe in a narrative form what we expected from a mission command network that allowed commanders and staff to do what they need to do. And so in a brief, succinct, and in layman's terms, we collectively, and I'll say we collectively because it was really staffed around the Army, produced a vision and a narrative to accompany those things, you know, that we need to do to develop leaders to exercise mission command. And so the terms that, you know, we sort of utilize to say what is required in your network in a system that connects platforms, formations, as well as our post camps and stations. And this is the goal, is to achieve expeditionary, uninterrupted mission command. Now, uninterrupted doesn't mean perfect communications, but something that still allows a commander and staff to perform his mission command tasks. Through a network comprised of intuitive, secured, and standards-based capabilities adapted to the commander's requirements. That's what it's about. And integrated into a common operating environment. These network capabilities must be assured, interoperable, tailorable, collaborative, and accessible at the point of need. Not just to us, but also our unified action partners. This then enables expeditionary mission command, where we talk about expeditionary maneuver from multiple locations and projecting power across all domains, integrating our institutional and operational capabilities with unified action partners to execute joint combined arms operations. That's what we're talking about, the role of the network. And the network must enable uninterrupted mission command. It doesn't mean perfect communications, but the network architecture must allow commanders and staffs and units to be at times disconnected, continue operations, reconnect when possible, and resynchronize within the network. Formations must remain capable in degraded, intermittent, and limited operations and cannot become solely dependent on connectivity for operations. So a lot of this is a work in progress. I mean, we've got tremendous capability now, and the team members that are sitting here on the panel all have an integral part of it, specifically as you look through the lens through sort of air and missile defense, but in the broader context of the Army. So how do we enable mission command through a network to allow our commanders, teams, and units to fight and win in a complex battlefield? Thank you.
So turn it over to John Morrison.
Sir, thank you very much, and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity this morning. I'm going to sort of amplify a little bit about what Bill was talking about. He talked about mission command, and you heard the underpinnings of the network being one of the key enablers that makes distributed mission command actually possible. There's a lot happening to make our network modern and capable enough to really support expeditionary and distributed mission command. So I would leave you really with 4 verbs as we work through this: standardize, modernize, integrate, and operate. You heard Bill talk about standard-based capabilities. Well, one of the challenges that we've had in the Army is we've had a whole bunch of stovepiped capabilities that we really did not standardize across the Army network, both strategic and tactical, so that we had common capabilities, common implementations of those capabilities, and then common procedures. So we've worked aggressively over the last year in our regional cyber centers to standardize the base capabilities that each one of them provides so that units can move around the world, and it's not like they transition from theater to theater and it's a completely new experience. Everybody remembers back in the day when you would go into Southwest Asia and every one of your computers had to be turned in and get re-imaged. We've all deployed and done that. That's no longer the case because we've now standardized our operations across all theaters where literally you can pick up from CONUS, deploy to any other theater in the world, not just Southwest Asia, and plug back into the network. Standards-based capabilities. We have much more work to do with that, but standardizing the way that we operate, standardizing the way that we think, and then standardizing and implementing those procedures so commanders understand it is absolutely foundational to what we're doing. The second most important thing that we're working on is modernization and modernizing our legacy strategic network and then integrating it with our tactical formations. Now, we're probably in the midst of the most comprehensive modernization effort for our network that we've ever been involved in. And it is a fundamentally different approach that we're taking. It is an inherently joint network built from the ground up that will provide the highway that will eventually be the joint information environment. And it's not PowerPoint. It has 3 legs of the stool that we really are focusing on. One is the Joint Regional Security Stack, of which 4 are already operational in the continental United States. We will have stacks operational in Europe and Southwest Asia this calendar year. The second piece of it is putting capacity onto our installations. I'll give you an example of the increase that we've got. At Fort Hood, Texas, we routinely would run at about 96% of the pipes that we're running onto that installation. We're taking bandwidth off the table. Today, after we've modernized that installation, they traditionally run at about the 10% range. That's going to allow us to collapse networks and provide capacity and put everybody onto a single, secure, inherently joint infrastructure for the very first time. The last piece of it is, the last leg of the stool is installation modernization. So if you had asked anybody in the Army how many installations we had modernized over the last 15 years, end to end, every building on that post, the answer would be 0. So what we've done is we've changed our approach. We have now teamed with our acquisition partners, and we have formed an integrated team to where we use our own engineering expertise, our own manpower, instead of going out and hiring contractors to come and do the installs. And we've been able to move at an unprecedented speed. In the last 18 months, we have modernized end-to-end 16 installations. So when you bring those 3 legs of the stool, and on top of it you put a common set of management, network management and defense capabilities, and you have an inherently joint network. And again, it's not PowerPoint. We have over 100,000 users in the Army that are now on this new infrastructure. By the end of this calendar year, we will migrate the three major installations in Europe and most of the Army installations in Southwest Asia onto this new infrastructure. We're doing the same thing on the SIPRNet side. So it is moving at pace. But then we've got to integrate all these capabilities. And that integration is really strategic to tactical. And bringing it into the one network vision that you heard Bill talk about. So we can truly do expeditionary operations in distributed mission command. Over the past year, we supported over 7 named operations. In not one instance did the unit take their full network capabilities with them. Almost every instance was distributed, where a portion remained back at home station and had to be connected to a footprint that was much smaller forward. Yet the commander wanted the same capabilities that he had as if he had his whole staff there. Engineering that and bringing that together is forcing an unprecedented collaboration between the strategic folks and the tactical folks to bring those capabilities together and again go back to the standards-based capabilities that you heard Bill talk about. And so now, if you're a tactical unit connected to the larger enterprise, you're operating the same capabilities. It's just who's doing what at each echelon. And it's forcing us to change the way that we think. But it's absolutely the right thing for us to do. And the last piece is we got to operate all this. You heard Bill talk about a vision. I would submit to you that vision is reality today, and the requirement exists today to support distributed mission command. And so by leveraging these operations, it's forcing culture change inside the Army to really get after the vision of what mission command truly is, and the network being that key enabler. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Morrison. Ron Pontius?
Yeah, good morning. On behalf of Lieutenant General Cardone, I want to thank General Sullivan and AUSA for everything they do for the Army, and again for the opportunity to participate in another important discussion. Thanks also to General Campbell and General Burleson for leading this panel. I want to focus my remarks on how Army Cyber Command and Second Army is enabling the Army to conduct network mission command and the expeditionary mission command today and into the future. Over the last 15 years, the Army has demonstrated tactical dominance in the land domain. However, the operating environment we find ourselves in today continues to change at an ever-increasing rate. To be successful in the future, the Army will likely have to reimagine how it conducts network mission command by, with, and through both the cyber and the land domains. I'd like to address 3 areas today. First, what does the current operating environment tell us about the future of network mission command? Second, how do we as an Army envision mission command given these changes? And finally, how does the Army address challenges to mission assurance to ensure the future mission command? First, Army and joint operations are dependent upon network capabilities enabled by cyberspace and space-based platforms from the strategic to the tactical level, and General Mann referred to many of these this morning. In the past, threats to our mission command network have been limited. However, the proliferation of technology, the decreasing barriers to entry for threats, and the adversary's potential asymmetric advantages pose a growing threat to the Army and the joint force. In the future, our adversaries will use cyberspace to influence populations, degrade the Army's technological superiority, and impede our ability to communicate, collect intelligence, operate, and execute mission command. In fact, we're already seeing these phenomena today. Russia continues to use cyberspace in a worldwide campaign of social media misinformation to shape domestic audiences and achieve their strategic objectives in Ukraine and elsewhere. Russian commanders are able to deploy information operations, electronic warfare, social media, and cyber attacks in a decentralized method that affords them significant operational autonomy without legal limitations. And they have demonstrated the effectiveness of leveraging these asymmetric capabilities to overcome their traditional military limitations. Social media and its power to influence who, what, and where information is delivered is also fundamentally reshaping our operating environments. We see this today in Russian efforts across Eastern Europe and the significant resources and efforts they are willing to dedicate toward their information operations their cyber capabilities, and the distribution of electronic warfare capabilities at echelon. To meet these challenges, we have to ask ourselves, are we prepared to execute Networked Mission Command in the future? As General Burleson said earlier, commanders enable mission command through the establishment of mutual trust, shared understanding, and clear intent. As a warfighting function, mission command integrates all other warfighting functions. Our Army is comfortable training and executing these functions in the land domain. However, future commanders must understand what it takes to train and execute also in the cyber domain. So where are we today? In fact, we currently conduct all these functions in cyberspace, and the Joint Force is currently learning how these effects are achieved with cyber capabilities to support Joint Force commander campaigns and scheme maneuver on the ground. These effects, however, are fairly limited today, but we should expect they will become ubiquitous for mission command in the future. We continue to build a more defensible network, as General Morrison talked about, through this network modernization. We're also building the Army's portion of the Cyber Mission Force that supports National Combatant Command and Army mission sets and requirements. Our Cyber Mission Force is engaged operationally today and is being deployed as quickly as we build the teams. They are delivering effects today on the ground and protecting our networks here at home. Our Army Cyber Command, TRADOC, and FORCECOM are working together to conduct a series of experiments at our combat training centers to determine how best to integrate cyberspace capabilities and operations into unified land operations. We call these experiments Cyber Support to Core and Below, and we just finished the third experiment with the 2nd Stryker Brigade, 2nd Infantry Division at the National Training Center. Although the experiment was successful in many respects, it also highlighted how much farther we as an Army have to go to train and eventually employ cyberspace capabilities and train as a truly networked force. While our formations are network-enabled and dependent, our training facilities and models require significant development to fully replicate a cyber-enabled operating environment. The emergence of cyberspace will require significantly greater integration across all Army warfighting challenges that will then inform significant Army-wide .mil-PF changes. As General McMaster noted last week, while Army Warfighting Challenge number 7 expressly addresses cyberspace capabilities, cyber is really a critical component of all of the Army warfighting challenges and requires greater Army-wide integration as we move toward Force 2025. The implications for these changes across .mil-PF are significant. We're also thinking critically for how we effectively integrate cyber, information operations, and electronic warfare capabilities and functions to enable mission command. As Dr. Karbler noted here in this building just 2 nights ago, there are many lessons the U.S. Army must glean from how Russia is fighting today. We're working toward achieving this synergy, but will require us to readdress some of our staff and institutional paradigms of the past and redefine them. We could be tactically dominant but still lose in this environment without understanding and dominating similarly in the information environment. This means developing commanders today and tomorrow who are as comfortable delivering their cyber, information operation, electronic warfare effects as they are synchronizing and delivering lethal fires. None of this is possible without significant Army-wide attention towards mission assurance and system resiliency. We must be prepared to operate in disconnected environments, but at the same time ensure our network systems are capable of withstanding threats to mission assurance that we are not accustomed to consider institutionally. In conclusion, our Army is entering both an exciting and a challenging future for Network Mission Command. Our operating environment has changed and continues to change with significant implications towards our conception of Network Mission Command. The Army is and will continue to evolve its concept and implementation of Mission Command. And finally, these factors also require us to re-examine the nature of mission assurance for our future force and our ability to fight and win in a complex environment.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Pontius. General Sheriff.
Well, thank you. General Sullivan, General Swan, foxhole friend, thank you for having me today. General Campbell, thank you for leading the panel. General Mann, General Rossi, thank you for being leaders in the community that we need right now. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm General Bramhall's deputy at the 263rd Army Air Missile Defense Command, so many years of experience with NORAD, NORTHCOM operations in the homeland. But I'm not going to speak to you from that position today. General Bramhall will be up a little bit later on, but I will answer questions if you have those. Primarily, I'm going to speak to you from an FCO standpoint, and my role is the Deputy Army National Guard senior person there for General Rossi at the Fire Center, working in conjunction with Chris Spillane. And actually, I'm sitting in Chris Spillman's seat today. He couldn't be here, but he passes his regards. So, boy, what a task before the AMD community right now. I walked in General Rossi's office, and he'll tell you I'm the guy that always asks myself a question: well, what's so hard about this? You know, what's so hard? We got a network. You know, what's the hard piece about this? And I said, a light bulb went off, sir. I said, it's the human dimension. I said, that's the hard piece. So I want to share with you some thoughts today that I put down on a piece of paper, and maybe it'll stimulate some thought. So the topic today, Network Mission Command, is a foundation, one foundation of the way ahead for the Army AMD force. I would like to offer some thoughts on the task before us and how it applies to the human dimension. As most of you know, the Army Air Defense community is in its first stages of transformation that is unprecedented. We will move from a systems approach to a functional approach. AIMD, Army Integrated Air and Missile Defense, is the mission command concept, the art, and will be implemented by IBCS, which we know what that acronym stands for, or the science. Army sensors and shooters will pair and operate in a closed, integrated fire control networks whose information will be shared via Link 16. All this is designed to counter a threat with multiple capabilities. Given that we are provided a material solution with adaptability, flexibility, and agility to meet the threat, how do we develop leaders and soldiers who have the prerequisite mental capability to employ this system to its fullest capability? It all starts with the schoolhouse, with the FCO, with the Center of Excellence. It starts with PME, Professional Military Education. The first step in this is getting the technical and tactical training back into the NCOES, which is happening right now through 2 pilot programs at the Fire Center, 14 Echo and 14 Tango. The functional alignment has also started with addressing the warrant officer with a 140 Echo split to get to the functional approach. MOS realignment will move from the systems approach to the functional approach. The result is a force that's capable of fighting in an air defense task organized configuration. Talent management will have to be addressed to ensure leaders get experience in training and the backgrounds necessary to lead. This approach is currently being implemented in the Captain's Career Course there at the Fire Center of Excellence. Subject matter experts, as we know them today, are master gunners, top guns, relate to specific air defense systems. In a functional approach, these experts will be required to execute tasks on more than one system. Huge challenge. As the soldiers transition from the school environment to a unit, the unit organization will be imperative for training. I think we've already heard the organizational structure mentioned twice here this morning. It'll be huge of how we organize our forces, in garrison particularly. A garrison environment that enables training for a functional approach will be imperative to building ready wartime capability. Key to this will be the development of gunnery tables and training events that reinforce adaptability, flexibility, and agility of the AIMD-enabled force. Application of the AIMD capability in combined joint and interagency environment will involve new challenges. Employment of AIMD capabilities is going to involve a paradigm shift, not only for the AMD leaders and soldiers, but for the maneuver commanders and the joint force. AIMD is designed to allow for more decentralized command and control of fires than we currently practice. Supporting commanders currently view Army Air Defense as working a point defense for TBM or a static defense for SHORAD. AIMD will provide a force capable of area defense against a wide array of threats. Confidence will only be built through practice. So as we can predict, the hard part is within the human dimension and what we know is the warfighting function. Clearly, there is only one way to properly address this. History shows that air defense was and is best integrated within the warfighter function and best understood by the leaders in charge when application is trained and practiced. More than ever, for success to be achieved in Army air defense transformation, near, mid, and far term, the concept of application must be understood and practiced across all disciplines that it touches and supports. In closing, consider a few points a task force commander and his senior Army Air Defense commander will discuss in the future. What does the task organization look like? It doesn't look like a fire unit used to. How does the threat drive the organization of the force? How is fire control and engagement operations controlled? EOCs, Engagement Operations Centers, are the new norm within the AIMD, built to decentralize command and control and allow engagement on multi-axis, multi-platforms, and sometimes low RCS threats. What is the comfort zone of the span of control for the EOC? And of course, what is the best air defense design based on the principles and tenets, which you'll find in the new draft copy, highly emphasized in the new draft copy of the 3.0. Combat and real-world situations do not allow time to practice these talents. Training will have to be programmed in resources before the ultimate ingredient of air defense transformation can be realized. And as the boss says, we can put the A back into AMD. Thank you. Ooh.
Thanks, Tim. Let me move to Colonel Spillane, and then Dan will follow up with you at the end. So, Kelly?
Can you hear me okay? Well, first, it's a pleasure.
You just turned it off.
You turn it off.
Can everybody hear me now? Sorry. It's a pleasure for me to be here and a part of this panel today, and to hear the rich discussions that we'll have, not just after this panel lead in, but also with the other panels later on today. We've talked a lot about Network Mission Command, and I'm already off my proposed remarks. But, you know, this is a swim lane. And it's a swim lane that has 3 lanes of sensors, shooters, and C4I. And we put a lot of effort into the sensor and shooter, and we really have to continue to push the envelope and push that person in the swim lane of C4I. Because we'll never realize the data that's being provided by our family of sensors out there and really be able to take advantage of that information in the timely manner that leaders from the tactical level to the strategic level want and need. We talk about IAMD and integrated air and missile defense, and it's just not about Army integrated air and missile defense, but we're going to lead. We're going to lead amongst the other services. We're going to lead amongst our other joint partners, and we're going to lead with the coalition. And really, to get to a network mission command, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're going to have other partners on this network. We want other partners on this network, but it will expose those networks to adversaries that want to do harm to the network, which will inhibit, in some cases, our ability to effectively achieve mission command. And so that's important. I mean, we're doing a lot with IBCS, something that didn't happen yesterday. It was actually back in the early 2000s, where we were thinking about the human dimension and that we were putting too much onus on 2 folks in a van to do a lot, and that we had to distribute that information. So it will become a reality, but probably not as quickly as we want it to, because of our necessity to have to manage expectations while balancing the budgets and resource constraints. But we can't afford to allow it to continue to move to the right. We've got to get it out there so that we can really begin to understand the human dimension implications, but more importantly, to be more effective. To be more effective from the tactical level to the operational level to the strategic level, and this is where I'll finish. Because regardless if you're in a geographic combat command where your flash to bang is minutes, you're at the operational level where you're looking at both an air and missile defense threat. I'll use NORTHCOM as a good example with NORAD and NORTHCOM, where they have a very dynamic and stressing threat. and you look strategically with the ground-based mid-course defense system and what we're doing, and that flash to bang is not as small as you would think. Yes, we have double-digit minutes, but there's a lot of folks who have an interest and a need to know and have to make recommendations to our national leadership. So network battle command, yeah, is absolutely important. And we've got to continue to push it so that we're not competing with the other competitors of our sensors and shooters, but we're in parallel efforts so that when we get that capability, we can really leverage that capability. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Kelly. Dan?
Can you hear me okay? Good, not off. Thank you, Kevin, and my fellow panel members here in AUSA for giving me the opportunity to talk here. We're really on the precipice of an exciting time about how we support the warfighter and the direction that we're going. If you think about the travel or the path we've paved over the last 20 years and how we have created the opportunity to do true network mission command, I mean, it's been a phenomenal move. And as you look to the future and the third offset types of discussions that you have and the adversaries that we're facing worldwide, our threat's becoming obviously a lot bigger than it ever has been before. We don't have the manpower to deal with it, and so the idea of network-enabled or network mission command becomes a lot more imperative. But it's not necessarily about the stovepipes that we've seen in the past. If you look at how the Army has evolved over the last 20 years, programs like FPCB2, Patriot, they're all very integrated, or I'll call it a stovepipe system in itself, where it allows and enables the warfighter to have capability that he's never had before. But the next generation is how are we going to tie all those systems together? We look at mission-focused, network and platform-enabled, integrated, fully integrated C2 that provides trusted data to the right decision maker at the right time in the right format so he can make an immediate decision on dealing with a potential threat. What does all that mean, though? If you look at the types of programs that we're dealing with in air and missile defense, IBCS is obviously that next generation where we're at, but it's really a first generation that we expect to be several generations of integrated C2. We look at IBCS right now, we're going through some very integrated flight tests, very successful. Milestone C scheduled for later this year. I know Mr. Pike will talk a little bit later on about where IBCS is at, but the successes that it's demonstrating is amazing. We're taking assets that were never intended to work together and tying them to other assets that were never intended to work together and doing something phenomenal. Sentinel radars, Q-36, Q-37 Patriot radars, sending signals to a Patriot shooter, in the future a potential THAAD shooter, Aegis, SM-3, tying it to C2EMC and fulfilling a much broader ballistic missile defense mission. The thought of being able to pull all those things together to carry out that mission is a phenomenal effort. And as you start thinking about where computing power is going to go over the next 10 to 20 years, we can't just settle on perfecting what we're doing today. We have to be settling or looking toward what we're going to be looking like 20, 30 years from now. And quantum computing, new materials, how are we going to keep up with the power of processing that evolves over the next 20 years? So the other thing that we do is we pull all available data. I'll give you a story with GMD, so I'll take it into the ballistic missile defense world. So with GMD, we just went through a flight test that demonstrated a number of things. So if you think of GMD, you've got a missile that takes off from, say, North Korea, three-stage rocket. It's going to break up in several pieces. It gets into outer space. At some point in time, within minutes, we've identified exactly who shot it, where it came from, and where it's going. But there's about 100 pieces of trash that are traveling at 15,000 miles an hour in outer space, looking to re-enter and go after its target. We have our GBIs, ground-based interceptors, that come out of Fort Greely. We've only got 30 of them. And if I don't know which one of those 100 pieces of trash is the reentry vehicle or the warhead, I got to shoot all 30 of those missiles. So I shoot them, and that's the best way I can guarantee that I hit that warhead. Savvy enemy will just put another missile right behind it, knowing that we've completely expended our resources, and there's where we are. So what else can we do? Well, we start accessing other resources that we have available, from satellites, overhead persistent infrared images, all sorts of radar feeds. We start applying the methods of physics and doing what we call discrimination. And at some point in time, we now have the ability to leverage all those extra assets and in real time assess which one of those pieces of trash is the warhead without being able to see it in the darkest space. Now I only have to send one missile instead of 30. And the idea of being able to leverage all of those assets to accomplish a mission that those assets were never really intended to accomplish before allows us to reduce the cost, reduce the manpower, reduce and make more effective those systems that are out there. And whether it's a GMD or it's an IBCS or it's a CRAM, All of those programs have the ability to leverage those assets and really create a more effective force. And whether it's IBCS and FBCB2, at some point in time, all of those elements will be plugged in together in a truly network mission command environment, which brings in a whole new series of threats. So we talked earlier about the cyber threat and the ability to penetrate those networks. And if you're going to get the right information to the right person at the right time, it has to be trusted information. How do you do that? And so that's where all of us in this room and industry and OSD and the forces that are out there, we are all working on making sure we get to that next generation to protect that information, get it to the right person at the right time in the right format so he can make the right decision immediately. And that's where we're going with Mission Command. And the benefits are innumerous as you start looking 20 years from now, and we're dealing with a manpower offset that requires us to be much more effective in how we process information, how we pass that information, and how we guarantee the right decision.
Thanks very much, Dan. So we have a few questions for the panel, and let me set out with this one, and it may take a couple of you, but how do we develop IBCS to resist Russian jamming or cyber, and that could be any adversary, and how do we build people who can fight in the dark when the network goes down?
Well, I'll take part of it. So IBCS, obviously, as you get into the environments and we've seen a lot of the EW issues that are coming from Russia, Ukraine, you've seen a lot of the data that comes out. You have to leverage the investments that all of industry and all of the military are making to protect from that threat. We're still developing, but it absolutely is one of the key focus areas for what we're doing as we start getting ready to field an IBCS out there. In terms of operating in the dark, again, it gets back to we have to assure that we have robust network capability. And a lot of the environments we go into, we're providing a tactical network. There is an infrastructure that's there. And all part of the IBCS system is to create redundancy where you can, protection where you can. One concept that gets a lot of attention is the idea of a mesh network or multiple frequencies where you have a path that is going multiple different directions so that if you block one path, it can find another path that's out there. So is it fair to say that we'll have a fully dark solution? I mean, a fully dark environment where you have to create a solution that it becomes a sneaker net or more manual? We're working towards creating a robust network so that you don't get to that. But we're quite a ways away from having the perfect network. But that's the direction that IBCS is going.
Thanks, Dan. And I'll ask General Burleson to comment on the training folks.
Yeah, I think the other part to add on to that is Tim talked a lot about it, and I thought it was very good when we talk about the human dimension. We talk about wanting to build leaders, and I'll just define leader as really any of us, of any rank, that have the ability to thrive in ambiguity and chaos. So if you think about operating in a disrupted, intermittent, or limited network environment, in addition to these redundancies, terrestrial-based ones, it's having leaders. And so, the investment and readiness that we put into our training centers have got to include these things. And the work that the Brigade Modernization Command does out at Fort Bliss, Texas, accounts for these things. What are the impacts across sort of Dotlam PF when we lose the network? And what are our redundancies that we need? And what are those sort of leader and soldier skills that we've got to develop so that as we're sorting it all out, we can continue the mission? So a lot of great work going on, a lot more to do on that, though.
Thank you, Bill. For General Morrison, you talked a bit about building the network and the jointness of that particular network. On the air and missile defense side, one of the things Dave Mann mentioned is we're looking to increase partners' capacity, which implies you want to integrate those partners. So what challenges do you see as we build this network mission command for integrating our partners who we're going to need?
That's a great question, and quite frankly, it applies almost across the entire spectrum of operations today. There's not one operation that is ongoing right now that I'm aware of that doesn't have coalition aspect to it. And the current approach is that there's a series of one-off networks that get built based off of the coalition partners that you have. The biggest challenge that we have right now is we haven't institutionalized a coalition network and the requirement to always operate that way and make it something that is just always available that we can quickly turn and bring to bear when we have a contingency arise. Now, there's several initiatives that are ongoing, primarily in the UCOM AOR and in the CENTCOM AOR, to start establishing a persistent, almost always-on coalition capability that you can extend based off of who your coalition partners are. And there's a couple different aspects to it. One is that everybody can come onto a common infrastructure and share, or you actually extend a point solution out and the information that you need to provide to a coalition partner is made available. We're going to have to come to grips with that, not just as an Army, but as a Department of Defense, and then apply the appropriate resources towards it so that we can have this always-on capability. But the networking piece of it is not really the challenge. Technically, we can push all that out. It's what capabilities are we going to put on that network, and how are we going to share information with a wide variety of coalition partners, everywhere from the Five Eyes to a partner that might be a one-off for a contingency operation supporting operations in Syria as an example. We're going to have to work our way through that. A lot of that is policy-driven. It's not technology-driven. But it is a capability that we need to rapidly get our arms around, and then we need to formalize it and build it into our everyday operations.
Thank you. This could be for you again, General Morrison. Network modernization, JRSS and JIE, all have been underway for some time now. Can any of you talk about or give examples of where you're seeing the impact of those efforts in missile defense and mission command?
So I got to put that a little bit in perspective. Yep. So the Joint Regional Security Stack and the Joint Information Environment was not even a concept 36 months ago. So it really hasn't been going on for that long a time. And the speed at which it's moving is pretty unprecedented. And to put it into context, there are now 4 Joint Regional Security Stacks that are operational. They're all here in CONUS. We'll have 2 more operational in Europe by the end of the calendar year, and 2 more operational in Southwest Asia by the end of the calendar year. And we are on a glide path to migrate almost the entire Southwest and Southeast onto the new infrastructure by the end of the calendar year. And it's not just the Army. I should have made that clear before. We are partnering very close with the Air Force, the Navy, and the Defense Information System Agency to move this along. This is an inherently joint endeavor. 3 of the 4 COCOMs will be on this new infrastructure by the end of the calendar year: UCOM, CENTCOM, and SOUTHCOM. Excuse me, AFRICOM, not CENTCOM. So it is moving very, very fast, and again, it's through this integrated approach. As it relates to ballistic missile defense, that will come as we move this around the country. For example, Sir Redstone will go onto the new architecture probably about the August timeframe. That will be the start, and then we'll expand it out from there. The second piece of this is we always talk about the Joint Regional Security Stack, but that's primarily an unclassified network endeavor right now because that's where the greatest threat was. Simultaneous to everything that we're doing, we're putting the same security architecture in place on our secure networks. That's just as important an effort, and that also is getting done in calendar year 16. That's where we'll really start seeing the biggest bang for the buck for the operational forces as we establish that common security apparatus for both operational forces that are supporting operations like SMDC, as well as for deployed tactical formations. I hope that answers the question, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. General Sheriff, as the skill set of young air defense officers and soldiers become more complex and harder to train, will TRADOC provide the institutional time to produce graduates that arrive at their unit ready to fight? And you might want to comment on old air defense officers, too.
Since I'm old, I want to make one comment first about an earlier question about the network. Everybody worries about the network. What happens if the network goes down? Consider this. So I'm a battery commander. I've got Patriot and I've got MML, and I'm fighting. I'm working out of an EOC. I've got an engagement operations center. And my job is to provide a contribution to the integrated air picture up to it could be the CFAC, it could be the JTF commander, whatever level of command that I'm supporting the BCT commander. It's not as important when that integrated air picture goes down, my contribution to that integrated air picture. What's important is the confidence that I've built working for him, that I've got everything within my envelope I still control. I control my IFCN. I've got my sensors feeding in, and I've got my array of shooters there. So as you go through the process, everybody will always say, well, what if the network goes down? Well, there are still ways through confidence building and through wargaming and doing the old art that we have lost over time that we will get back to address that. So as you take to address this, that's my thought. So as you address this other piece of how do we go from an MOSQ standpoint, from a system to a functional approach. When you look at the chart, or you got a human dimension chart there. You got journeyman, you've got apprentice, and you've got expert, and it's built over time, and it's built over your rank. You're coming through AIT, and a large part of it is built still off of the NCO Corps within the organized units. And I touched on it earlier. I believe that the organization of these units, these multifunctional units, will be imperative to how we go through these apprentice, journeyman, and expert programs. So it's going to take a huge part of talent management and career assignment development and a sharper focus in from the leadership of how, and support from the NCO Corps, from the sergeant majors, of how we're tracking these personnel through their career. Because as I stated earlier, the trade-off, the fire center's responsibility, it will happen. They will get MOSQ, the POIs will be built, they will adjust over time, and they'll come out in some form or fashion of the best they can do in a garrison environment of schoolhouse training. But the huge part, as it's always been, will be the unit assignment and how you progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Mr. Pontius. We're a nation of laws. Laws are built on individual rights and property rights. Are the laws and policy of the nation where they need to be for us to protect our networks?
The policy debate or the policy challenges, clearly the pace of technology is evolving, is policies having challenges keeping pace with the technological change. In the basic defense of our networks, I think that's fairly straightforward, right? It's about what we're doing to implement the best practices, architecture, configuration management, patch management, and mentioned earlier about the human dimension. One of the most critical parts of the whole defending the network is the human and what they're doing on it, right? And condition vulnerabilities. The larger cyberspace operations, when you think full spectrum, which includes the Department of Defense Information Network or DoDIN operations, defensive cyberspace operations and offensive cyberspace operations, how that really means in integration of information operation electronic warfare and the international norms and what it means to have a cyber event, and I use that word generically. If you look over the last year with the Sony Pictures incident, with the Office Personnel Management incident, how those have been portrayed, there's been a little bit of word gymnastics, so to speak, as we're working our way through this. So yes, the policy piece is lagging. I believe it'll come over time. Clearly here in the United States, it's always the balance of what it means about national security versus privacy of individuals, and I'm confident the U.S. will find its way through that.
Thank you. For Dan Verwiel. In terms of Air and Missile Defense Network Mission Command, you've talked about open architectures. There's common off-the-shelf equipment that's in that system. So what do you see as the advantages for the Army in the future when it comes to modernizing a system?
So the whole idea behind the IBCS network, and that carries into any of the command and control or mission command elements that we'd integrate, that we tend to focus on the bright, shiny parts of IBCS. So IBCS has many legs. I think someone alluded to it earlier, but the legs that get the most attention are the sensor part of the equation and the effector part of the equation, and then the C4I elements that are in there. But the other pieces are, how are we addressing the human element, as we talked about, and bringing that into the equation. So one of the really nice features of IBCS and next generation applications is bringing human factors into the design of the system. So with IBCS, we have the man-machine interface, or the user interface that they look at. It's being built around a user experience, understanding exactly the types of things that are important to the eye, the things that they need to see so they can process the information as quickly as possible. The benefit to that is a much simpler training process, getting your manpower ready to fight much earlier, much sooner. So instead of a 2 or 3 week training campaign, it might be a 2 or 3 hour training campaign. The other idea of integrating capabilities is in a stovepiped environment where you have these individual elements that are out in the battlefield, you have to man those with a pretty large force to keep them maintained. Now that you've networked them, you've taken a lot of the manpower requirement away. So you really do get a much more effective force. You're utilizing them by putting the right people in the right places. Less training, certainly by leveraging legacy assets that are out there. We take an IBCS, I can plug a Q36 or Q37 or Sentinel radar into the system and accomplish a lot of objectives that don't require a new sensor. So I'm able to leverage existing assets. Same thing with shooters. Imagine a day right now we're using Patriot, but if I can use my radar assets through the C4I and determine that I don't need to send a Patriot missile to take that particular target out, I can shoot it with a Stinger or an Avenger, or actually pick a part of the asset or the inventory that could take that particular target out. There is huge economic and time savings, manpower savings that you can leverage by tying a lot of these pieces together. We're a long way from being there, but as I said earlier, we're right on the precipice of something very big, and IBCS proves that we have the capability of tying those things together that were never intended to be tied together in a manner that takes advantage of the human element.
Thank you very much, Dan. For Kelly Spillane, Network Mission Command implies integration, and how do you think Air and Missile Defense Network Mission Command addresses the combatant commander's gaps and requirements?
So we actually did a quick scrub of the latest CGA, and we did not see where Mission Command was above the line per se in competing with other gaps that they have. So what I found interesting is why isn't it up there, right? And so we've got to make sure we're getting out and understanding, are they comfortable with where they are from a Mission Command's perspective today? And how is our strategy going to improve that? So at first blush, it doesn't appear to be an issue, but I just believe that we haven't gotten out there and exposed some of the challenges we're having as we move towards IBCS in a larger architecture as MDA continues to evolve the C2BMC network.
Okay. Thank you very much. For the panel, once the network is modernized, how do you ensure it remains state-of-the-art? Does open architecture play an important role? How is OA being written into the requirements? Maybe, John, you might want to start with some of that.
I'm going to shift away from open architecture because it really comes back to being standards-based. You heard Bill sort of mention that, standards-based capabilities. And what you want to do is, and what we are doing with this modernized network, and I apologize for the melon head, it's obviously back behind me. What you want to do with the network is establish a standards-based network so that you can rapidly spin in and spin out capabilities so we can actually ride industry's coattails. And that's just something that we have not done before. We have not leveraged industry innovation when it comes to network technologies to the maximum extent that we should have. So as you take a look at what we're doing with the Joint Regional Security Stacks and establishing the capacity that goes on to the installations, and even at the installation level, we're now laying in those standards end to end. And we're also integrating it with our tactical teammates so that we can do the same thing on the tactical side of the house. Because once you establish that foundation, you are able to rapidly spin in not only network capabilities, but also cyber capabilities. And so that standards-based infrastructure is absolutely critical, both at the strategic level, the operational level, and at the tactical level, and in integrating it end to end. And that's the journey that we're on right now, is establishing that foundational piece.
And I would add to it, it's really balancing the capabilities with the defense of the network. As we collapse the network and the standards base, we're able to actually see the network, because right now we have such a disparate amount of networks. The very first challenge from a defense point of view is the situation awareness and seeing ourselves. It's going to be tremendous capability moving forward as we're collapsing these and modernizing these networks.
And even I'm sorry, sir. And even without the modernization aspect, there's a lot of standardization in establishing those common technical standards that we can do with the capabilities that exist today. The challenge that we're really going to have to get after is not necessarily on the network side. It's going to be establishing those standards on the application side so we can do the level of integration that you heard the panel talk about before.
But I'll add to that, one of the things that we collectively have to continue to do is keep that all of the elements of that network up to date, because everything is going to continue to progress, and the value of the network, the capability of the network is, and the capability of processing power is going to continue to increase over, for as long as all of us in this room live. But one of the things, I go back to one of the programs I used to run when I was a young professional at TRW, and that was the FPCV2 program. And I reflect on that a lot because it is a real demonstration of the issues that you run into as you get a massive acceptance of a program. So FPCB2, when it was first fielded, was intended to be very rudimentary, blue force tracking. I just want to know where the friendly forces are. Really only intended for 600 to 1,000 platforms in our first penetration into Iraq. And it was received so well that over the course of just a handful of years, it was adopted by the force, and the intent was to get it fielded on over 180,000 platforms. That network that we built was never intended to handle that much traffic, but as people started using it, they demanded more and more information over that network. When we first set it up, it was built on a satellite-based network. Well, once we bid the Beyond Line of Sight capability, it was a satellite-based network that had a transceiver that was less than the original modem you had in your house back in 1980. 1.8 kilobits of data were moving back and forth in there. And all of a sudden, they wanted Intel data. They wanted pictures. They wanted to be able to communicate, text. And within, as we were starting to build that network, within, 2,000 platforms, the network came to its knees, just crashed. And so it proved that, it's not just about how you process the data, it's how you pass it. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to what does your network look like? How does it set up? So, and then as that network gets expanded, because Moore's Law has created unbelievable capacity now on the networks, and we heard about where we're going in terms of network improvements today, you got to keep the C4I or the C2 continuing to modernize, because there will be that continued demand for more and more and more data. So as we implement these systems, that's the thing we need to be aware of is once they're adopted, there's no limit to what people are going to demand to come off out of that information.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Did you want to comment on that?
No.
Ron? Okay. We only have a couple minutes left, so this will be the last question. Usability of these complex networks is the topic. Most acquisition requirements do not include KPPs or an annex on a valve for the system to be designed to the human that is going to use it. Industry doesn't get orders, access to users until after they bid and build the system. What steps are being taken to mitigate these challenges?
I'll say it from an industry perspective. So, and I'll talk about it from Northrop's perspective, but I believe, certainly in Northrop's case, but I see a lot of my industry partners out here, I think we're all doing the exact same thing. The reality that the human factor has to go into however you bid it is there. There are universities now that specialize in user experience, human factors, and everything we design. We spend a lot of research and development dollars on trying to create a design that is much more usable for all those benefits that we talked about earlier, from a training aspect, from an effectiveness aspect. One of the capabilities we have on all our companies is a UX capability where you are actually analyzing where does a person's eye go when he's under stress? Where should I put the most important pieces of information on this data? What is usable? What is not necessary to be there? So there is a tremendous amount of industry investment going into UX. I know that several of the research labs here in the Army are doing the exact same thing. So there is a lot of thought being put into the human factors side of these programs we go in, and it's very different from how we designed 10 years ago. We are designing pretty regularly across all the programs now with a UX basis behind what we're putting in the field.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Well, thank you all panelists. Excellent responses. So thank you all for being a great audience.